All right, let's get right into it. We're going to talk about something primal: lust. I mean, think about its journey. How on earth did one of humanity's most powerful forces go from being this sacred, divine fire to just another product? Something to be optimized, streamed, and sold right back to us. This is really the story of a theft, the theft of desire itself. Just let that sink in for a second. Before it was an algorithm, desire was, well, it was a mystery. It was wild, it was a little terrifying, and people saw it as this force that could literally create or destroy worlds. It belonged to the gods, to poets, not to corporations. It was a power you had to fear and respect. So, what happened? What happened to that sacred fire? That's really the big question we're tackling here. How was this fundamental, raw human instinct captured, broken down into parts and then repackaged and sold like it's a new phone? To get it, we have to go way back to a time before lust was even considered a sin. Okay, so our story starts in the ancient world. And back then, desire wasn't seen as some kind of personal failing. Not at all. It was a divine inheritance. It was seen as the raw animating force behind, well, everything. Connection, creation, you name it. And these ancient cultures, they personified desire in some really fascinating ways. I mean, take Inanna or Ishtar. She wasn't just a goddess of sex. She held power over life and death. Or Lilith. She wasn't some demon. She was a symbol of defiant, untamed sexual freedom. And for Plato, Eros wasn't just about physical appetite. No, it was the engine that drove us toward truth and beauty. You see, erotic desire was kind of the original social technology. It's what bound us together, long before it got branded as a sin. For centuries, this idea of the sacred erotic was just normal. But then came what you could call the great rebranding of desire. It really kicked off with St. Augustine. He was, wrestling with his own desires, and he ended up reframing lust as this biological flaw we all inherited from the fall of man. Then, centuries later, Thomas Aquinas made it official. He codified lust as a deadly sin. And the interesting thing is, it wasn't because it felt good, but because it separated pleasure from procreation. Suddenly, the body wasn't a temple anymore. It was a trap. So you end up with this really stark contrast. I mean, it's night and day. On one side, you've got desire as this creative spark, this bridge between our physical and spiritual selves. And on the other, it's an internal enemy, a disordered appetite that you have to conquer and control. This massive theological shift, it basically laid the groundwork for everything that came next. And it turns out, all that theological guilt, it created the perfect foundation for the modern marketplace. Because capitalism didn't just suppress lust. Oh no, it did something way smarter. It co-opted it, it refined it, and it turned that ancient sin into a modern-day sales pitch. The connection was hiding there in the language all along. The Latin word luxuria. It's the root for both luxury and lust. Isn't that wild? It originally described a craving for excess in all forms, not just physical, but material too. This just shows you that deep historical link between pleasure, wealth, and moral suspicion, a link that capitalism would learn to exploit perfectly. So how did they pull this off? Well, it was a slow, calculated process. You could almost call it a cultural striptease. It started small, with suggestive ads just testing the waters. Then it moved on to normalizing objectification, chopping up bodies into parts in the media to sell things. After that, Hollywood and pop culture slowly chipped away at the old taboos. And eventually, you get to profitable pornography. It wasn't some corruption of the system. It was the logical, most honest endpoint of this whole process. There's actually a term for this, from Karl Marx, of all people. He called it commodity fetishism. And the basic idea is that under capitalism, the human relationships and all the labor that goes into making a product, they just disappear. And the product itself gets this magical, desirable aura. We stop seeing the people involved, and we only see the thing we want. And this is exactly how that fetishism plays out in the marketplace of desire. The male gaze, as it's called, wasn't just some cultural theory, it became a full-blown market strategy. Women's bodies were disassembled to sell products, and men were basically trained to see them not as whole people, but as things to be evaluated and acquired. In this kind of transaction, men were being seduced, sure, but women were being sold. Okay, and that brings us right up to the 21st century, where this whole logic has been put on steroids. The new masters of monetized desire, they're not ad executives or Hollywood producers anymore. They're algorithms. Just think about the impact of the modern porn industry for a second. On a neurological level, it completely overstimulates our reward circuits, which leads to addiction-like patterns. Relationally, it totally distorts our expectations and can create real emotional distance. And then there's the cultural effect. It's teaching an entire generation that sex is just a performance and that bodies are basically props. It completely fractures our shared understanding of what intimacy is. It gives you climax, but without any communion. And the engine driving all of this is what the source material calls the pimp master algorithm. And that's a perfect metaphor, right? It's this cold digital logic that doesn't feel desire itself, but it has become an absolute expert at extracting value from our loneliness and our longing. It knows what you want before you do, and its only goal is to keep you clicking. So, welcome to the digital brothel. Here, your attention, your gaze, your clicks, that's the currency. We're sold these one-sided parasocial relationships that give us the feeling of intimacy without any of the actual risk. And now we're getting into some really terrifying territory. Technology like deepfakes and AI-generated partners, they make another human being totally optional. It's the ultimate closed loop of consumption. So where does all this leave us? Well, lust is no longer just a personal vice or one of the 7 deadly sins. It's become the very infrastructure of our digital economy. It's not a bug in the system, it's a feature. And that's the key takeaway here. The mystery of Eros, with all its risk, its patience, its vulnerability, it's been engineered away. It's been replaced by this frictionless loop of instant gratification. What used to be whispered in the shadows is now optimized for engagement and streamed on demand in glorious HD. And this is the ultimate cost. When desire is sold back to us as a product, one that's designed for endless consumption instead of genuine connection, then real, messy, unprofitable love, it risks becoming obsolete. Just a ghost in a very, very efficient machine. And that's the question we're left with, isn't it? In a world of simulated, perfectly engineered desire, what becomes of real connection? As our fantasies get automated and our intimacy is mediated more and more by screens, what happens to the real thing?